Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is presented this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The Honda CR-V has been my favorite vehicle in Honda's lineup for years because it has great gas mileage and can haul a vintage furniture find with ease. In fact, it's so easy for getting out there in general, from the beach to the mountains to even the next photo shoot for a Southern travel article. Purchasing a CR-V from Townsend Honda means purchasing from a family-owned company built on service and connection with its customers, and they want to remind you of the joys of a jaunt down the road. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Honda salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. It's not the neighborhood you expect. It's not throwing those flashy Atlanta vibes with its post-industrial decor and lack of dress code or velvet ropes. And the night I visited, a festive group was having birthday fun, laughing and singing at the chef's counter. Welcome to Lazy Betty, a mirage of unapologetically upscale dining in an unassuming brown building in the Candler Park neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. Chefs Ron Sue and Aaron Phillips met during their tenures at Bernardin in New York City, and they curate an intimate experience with an open kitchen setting and conversational service. The modern menu embodies the inspiration of years of professional training, and I had everything from a halibut with succotash and green tomato and ham broth to something called a duck cigar. Each course was delicious, intellectual, and fun. I'm so happy to be thrilled by restaurants again. And I was thrilled by my Lazy Betty experience, a roller coaster ride of what fine dining can be. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Lazy Betty.
Thank you for having us on. We're very excited. We love the Southern Fork.
Well, thank you. I love Lazy Betty, which I think we all know after that based on the effusive social media I did that night. But I was so enamored of your restaurant, and I have many, many questions to get us started. But I want to tell listeners that I just simply ran out of time in Atlanta to have you on the podcast in person. And it was even Aaron's birthday. So thank you for doing this today.
It was such a gift.
So the thing that really blows me away about the restaurant, besides the food, because that's a given, is the fact that it's unapologetically fancy food. Like food that I would say some people would see as intimidating, but yet the place feels like a neighborhood joint. How did you build that juxtaposition, you two, besides the fact that you're cool, regular guys who just happen to know how to do all of this fine dining stuff, modern cuisine?
So I would say that, Ron's vision was exactly that. And in our relationship, I would definitely say he's more the visionary. So as far as that juxtaposition goes, I mean, Ronald definitely, was forefront originally about that was his intent. And then the implementation just has to do with our culture, how we treat each other, how we treat our guests. So the vibe it's real, and it's what we try to procure there. And it shows up in the food and gives us the ability to do all sorts of different things with the food, but also remain humble and casual in a way, if you will.
Yeah, we also, I mean, we do it deliberately as well. Whenever we hire staff and we go through the training process, and when we first opened and everyone was green, it was it was a conscious decision to tell everyone, talk to people like they're your cousins or they're your best friends, or like not like they're complete strangers and you're serving them. Talk to them like you're just cooking. You're hosting a fancy dinner party for them at your house, but your house happens to be Lazy Betty. And I think our staff likes that, and they don't like. And it's like what Aaron said. It's just part of our culture. It's how we hire. So it kind of goes twofold. We deliberately preach it, and we also do it through hiring the right people that also share those values with us.
I love tasting menus. And so I go to a lot of restaurants that have those where I give up control of the dining experience to chefs. So it's so refreshing to see regulars. When I was there that night, you all knew people. It was like they come in for, tasting menus traditionally aren't places that you go regularly. They're more special occasion. Was that also part of the culture?
I mean, we kind of preach what we practice, right? So, like, if we're telling people, talk to them like your friends and, they're your cousins, then you also have to develop that relationship with your guest. So, like, we do shoot the shit and talk to our guests, but we also make sure that we try to get to know them on somewhat of a personal level, as much as they'll let us in, because that's really what hospitality is about is making people feel at home and welcomed and part of something.
Yeah, I imagine that the chef's counter is like the first row of a stand-up comedy club, and I like to roast our guest, if you will, because it just fucking works. People like to have a good time, and people enjoy the ability to sort of let loose and not be so uptight and not be constricted. So, I mean, the idea is to have really badass food, really badass pairings, and hit all the points of service, but not necessarily be so uptight when it comes to the delivery. So it's a fine line that we walk, but you kind of crossed our fingers and hope that it would be well received, and Atlanta's been very good to us so far.
Yeah, it has been really well received. It was hard for me to get a reservation, but thankfully I knew a few people, so that worked out. But you had people doing picnics in the parking lot. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, so I will leave our guests' anonymity on the table, so to speak, but it was definitely one of our regulars who really helped push forward our program during that terrible time. And he would come with his wife, and this guy is super into bourbon, and we had a lot to talk about on that end. And he loved our food, and he would come about once a week and literally purchase our to-go food and then sit in the parking lot and lay out a picnic. Yeah, and they would enjoy. It's awesome.
That kind of loyalty is rare in a large market like Atlanta, and Atlanta has so many restaurants. So I imagine that you two had to really develop a loyal relationship because Ron had to convince you, Aaron, to move south with him and open this restaurant in Candler Park, right? How did that come about? Can you give me the background a little bit?
I
know
hate
it was
snow.
in the kitchen.
I hate snow. Oh, it's about that easy. You know, Ronald had this idea, and honestly, the majority of the vision, again, it is Ronald solely. So I don't really I want people to know that don't know that about Lazy Betty. If they don't know that, here it is. But we had looked at spaces together up in New York and couldn't really find anything that we liked that we thought financially made sense either. And Ron being from Atlanta and having family in the business and thriving, and the city of Atlanta itself thriving, when he told me he was moving back to do this concept, I was like, where's my invitation? And I'll let Ron take it from there.
Yeah, so I actually, remember when I decided to move from New York to Atlanta, I reached out to Aaron to see if he wanted to meet up for lunch, and it was a double date with my wife and his partner at the time. And it was basically, I was just meeting up to tell him that I'm moving out of the state and to go open up a restaurant. Not really looking to try to recruit anyone from New York, because I just didn't think it would be a hard sell. And Aaron had a very serious partner at the time. He owned his own condo in New York, and he had roots, and his brother was up there, so I never really considered it. But when I told him, Aaron was like, yeah, aren't you going to ask me? And I was like, ask you what? And he was like, to come down. And I'm like, oh, like, sure. Like, it didn't even cross my mind. Mm-hmm. And so, I told him, and then I moved down to New York, or moved to New York, like, I don't know, I think 2 weeks later.
You moved to Atlanta.
To Atlanta 2 weeks later. And then 2 weeks after I moved to Atlanta, Aaron calls me and is like, hey, I'm in Atlanta. And I'm like, oh, how long are you in town for? He's like, I moved here. And I was like, whoa, damn. All right. And then that's
where it started.
And then after that, we just hit the ground running and did whatever we could to get the restaurant open.
Yeah, I don't do stuff. I mean, I just do stuff. I don't really think.
It's working out. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
It seems to be working out, but
I thought I'd just throw that one up there.
We have a very good team that complements each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thinking about building this place, Ron, I'm correct in saying you grew up in the restaurant business, right?
Correct.
A lot of people really want to get away from that. What about the restaurant business got in your blood? Because this has been your life already.
I mean, I don't know if I chose the restaurant business or it chose me. I grew up in the restaurants that my parents ran, not out of necessity, not because I had a desire to go work at them at a young age. It was because, my mom was an immigrant, didn't have a lot of money. So running a restaurant and trying to raise 3 kids was very hard. So naturally, in order to keep an eye on me, she had me basically dropped off. She convinced the school superintendent to have the school bus last stop at my mom's restaurant. And that was my stop. So I would literally get off the school bus and go straight into my mom's restaurant for a large portion of my childhood. And on weekends when she was because restaurants are busiest on the weekends, she definitely didn't have time to watch me or my sister, my brother at home. So a lot of times the last resort was to just have us go to work and stay out of trouble. That way she can keep an eye on us. And while we were there, we just naturally helped out and did things, You
knew how to roll silver a long time ago, right?
Yeah, I knew how to roll silverware. I knew how to count the till and the cash register. I knew customer service. You just know the inner workings of a restaurant. You know how it works. Customers come in the door, they sit down, you get the order gets submitted to the kitchen. And so all those little things that I was immersed in my environment just became ingrained in me. It wasn't even something that if I have a new chef starting, I may have to literally pull that chef to the side and be like, all right, let me show you how to do this very hands-on and walk him through it. Whereas because I grew up in the industry, but anytime I left and worked in other restaurants, a lot of the operations and stuff just came natural to me. I could understand.
Instinctual.
Yeah, it was very instinctual because I grew up in the industry, that I could be like, oh yeah, I understand how this system works. Whereas other people it may take them a few more months to be like, oh, okay, I understand the flow of service and why it's set up this way.
I want to jump back on the thing that Ron said, which I've said before, and that's like the restaurant business, whether you grew up in it or didn't, it's one of those things where people always want to know how you got there, because seems people always sort of say it with this like this sort of tone behind it of, well, there's so many easier options to make a living. Why are you doing this to yourself? And
that is especially in the South, especially true of the South. Yeah.
And so for me, I didn't grow up in the restaurant business, but it chose me. I started watching Emerald when I was like 6 years old, and I just remember the excitement and the joy that he brought to people through his show. And for me, that was a much more pedestrian introduction to the business. But 14 years old in Missouri, you're legally allowed to work. At least that was the case in the 90s. And I started working in my first Italian restaurant, dishwashing, and I never really looked back. So very different route to end up in the same spot, but nonetheless,
I'm the same way, observing adjacently, but I'm a cultural observer of what you do. And, you know, I've watched Julia Child and Yan Can Cook and all of that on PBS Food. So it just, you know, when I finally came to this on a circuitous route, it was like, duh, I've loved this stuff since junior high. I know we're going to talk about the food, but Ron, since this is your restaurant and not your family's restaurant, can you tell me one element that you love about it?
Well, just to be, you know, transparent, my brother and sister are partners in it, even though they don't really do any of the operations or decision-making processes, but they do act as a sounding board. They were very supportive when we didn't have a brick and mortar. You know, they let us use their restaurants as kind of testing grounds for our for our pop-up. So we owe a lot of them to a lot of our success to them. And Aaron is also a partner in the business. So it's not just my restaurant, even though it was my vision.
That vision. I mean, just that idea of, you know, when you grow up in a restaurant, you think sometimes I would imagine, what would my restaurant look like? And so now that it lives in the world, and it's not just your restaurant, but it is your restaurant too.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
True.
So that's really the question I'm asking, and thank you for that clarification.
Of course. So the way I kind of materialized it, you know, I've known for a long time that I wanted to open up a restaurant. I probably knew it 8 to 10 years before I even moved back to Atlanta. But it really, the vision really started to dial in for me after I left Le Bernardin the first time and became an executive chef at another restaurant in New York. And that restaurant, it was great. It was my first time being the official executive chef. But there were a lot of things about that restaurant that made me realize what I did not like about restaurants and how restaurants can be ran in terms of, you know, ownership and core values and stuff like that. And so that kind of helped me dial it in. And also working in New York, I was lucky, very lucky that during my time at Le Bernardin, part of my job was to go out to eat in various restaurants, whether in New York or across the country. You know, like Chef Repair was very adamant about me knowing what the competition was doing and making sure that we're better or that we don't fall behind, right? And one thing that I noticed about dining in these big markets like San Fran and New York, Chicago, is that with a certain price point and certain dining room aesthetics, like big chandeliers or white linen, came a little formality. And I always thought that formality was a barrier in really developing a relationship with your guests. Right. So when I was thinking, you know, back to kind of touch up on your original question, you know, is what was important to me was like, I really wanted to be able to develop a rapport with my guests, and not just think of them as a customer or guest and really treat them like, you know, like a friend or cousin kind of coming over for a little dinner party. And I also love cooking great food. And I also love, you know, Aaron and I kind of think of us as artists in a way, in that how we think about food, compose menus. And we were like, and we both like cooking on that level. So we were like, let's do a tasting menu, but let's have it with a very casual and personal, you know, service element. And those were the two main things driving Lazy Betty.
And I think it's just part of the new generation of restaurants. This is what the present and the future is going to be. This is not an old school restaurant by any you have to really have a lot of people, both front and back of house. And I say back of house theoretically because I can see the back of house from the front of house. I think it's pretty much I'm sitting in the back of house, which I like, and that's fun. But, especially as we're coming back from this time where so many of y'all were shuttered for so long, I don't think that we're going to have the numbers that we had of the labor force that we had before. I think we've had a distillation of people that really want to be in restaurants. And so you have to pay for that kind of level of understanding, right? Both front of house and just your skill sets and back of house. How are you dealing with that?
Well, I think I'd like to back up just a little bit towards your previous question and then parlay that into this as well. So this actually goes back to the sort of non-formality that me and Ron cultured here. And it was a gamble that we took, but it was something that we believed in, and it worked. What Ron had talked about in these larger markets with the white tablecloth and the tuxedo servers and stuff like that was sort of this. I think what he's really getting at is people were excluded from sort of dining at the restaurant, maybe through, you had to come dressed up. The dress codes were intense and things like that. So we don't have a dress code because we want anyone to be able to come enjoy it in the way that they feel comfortable. And so being able to go out on a limb and take a leap of faith that what we were doing and our vision was right, regardless of if it meant that we would do less covers or maybe even fail altogether, we still did it because it was something we believed in. That has translated into our ability to internally manage a staff and keep, our employees happy, well paid, respected. And that's the most proud thing that I have of Lazy Betty is how our staff, I believe, how our staff feels about their job here. And working with us, not for us, but with us.
Right. I love that. And it feels that way. And I think a lot of that goes back to that restaurant culture. Ron, you mentioned that tipping and the idea of tipping and service charges are part of that, right?
Yeah. So something that we do at Lazy Betty is we implement a service charge. And that way we can make sure that we basically know that there's a certain amount of money that we can give to our staff and make sure that they can make a good living. I know when during the pandemic, when a lot of restaurants all rushed to open back up, a lot of them were short staffed because, quite frankly, for a lot of restaurants, the unemployment was better than what they were making at the restaurant. So why would they want to go back to work if they could just make more claiming unemployment or or living off that stimulus check? So what we did, we wanted to make sure that, hey, and we actually was doing this before. So, but, we wanted to make sure if the government deems that a certain amount is what people need to live off of and restaurants aren't supplying that, then something needs to change. Right. And I like to think of us as pretty well paying. And we just make sure and offering the service charge ensures that we can make sure that the staff gets a good pay.
Yes. And it's actually from a dining standpoint, really calming.
Yeah.
Because, you come into Lazy Betty and you can have fun because you don't have to make a lot of choices. You can, you get your pairings if you need them, and then you have a service charge. So it is a very relaxing thing from a dining standpoint, or at least it was in my case.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the food for a minute, because I know that sometimes I'm so interested in the culture of the restaurant that my feedback is like, we don't know what they cook.
One more thing before,
yes,
if I may, one more thing, because I like talking about that too. So the thing is that there's one question I like to ask people when I do interviews, and I ask them like, what's your long-term goal? And it's not a really unique question to ask as an employer to a potential employee, but it's really important to me, their response. And I tell you that the people that we look for at Lazy Betty are people like I want people that want to own their own restaurant, somebody that wants to grow, that wants to move up, that wants to have my job. somebody that wants to open their own bakery or their own catering department, even if they don't work with us forever, just those types of driven individuals.
They're career-minded industry people.
And so I rather hire slow and hire the right people, because then when something does go south, like a pandemic happening and the hospitality industry gets destroyed, those are the type of people that are there for the love of the game, that will be there in any aspect that they can to keep it moving forward.
Absolutely. Yes. And those are favorite restaurants to dine in, and because everything's clicking.
The food.
Because people they are just trying to make their rent. They're there as a career choice. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that, is what I was saying. I think we're going to be seeing less of people using it as a stopgap measure, and really more investment because of restaurants like Lazy Betty. And we will be continuing to shift the pay conversation, I think, or I hope we do.
One thing we're actually talking about doing now is, offering something right off our bottom line to the staff. So it's almost essentially like almost like profit sharing, right? So that, we don't know the number yet or how we're going to structure it, but basically X amount goes out, is allocated to all the staff so that they feel like they're part of it.
Not feel like, so they are.
They are part of it.
Yeah,
I mean, both. So
feel like
so they are part of basically knowing that the more work they do, the better the business does, the more they also get in return for their hard work. It's easy for restaurants for us to do that right now because of the hard work Aaron and I have put in. There were financial obligations we had to take care of before, but I hope that because the market's attention to how financially precarious restaurants are, that this is an opportunity for restaurateurs to kind of recalibrate and make sure that they're providing good, livable wages to their staff and making them, and not just using them like they're, a wheel in the machine, but an actual part of the team and, extension of the owners. We want it to be their restaurant too.
Love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the food, because like I said, it is unapologetically super fancy and well crafted, and where things are fun and there is definitely whimsy. There is a high level of skill with each one of these courses and a lot of prep work, which is just a cornerstone, I can tell, of your restaurant. So how did you decide to put fences on your creativity when you have a tasting menu? Because you can do anything.
Well, there's a couple parameters that me and Ron kind of mantras, parameters, fences that we sort of abide by for the most part. So there's the 4 critical elements. I'll definitely hand it over to Ron in a minute to talk about that. But I think the one skill that I would say that we always try to provide in each dish is the intellectual skill. What's on the plate, but you can't see it. And so the intellectual properties that go into making a dish, whether it be the different temperature of the ingredients they're within the same dish, even the same bite, that when come together, trick the mind and sort of make it whimsical, that you might not even pick up on just by looking at it or even eating it.
Yeah, right. It could be like a flavor profile. So what Aaron was speaking about, would be what's the intellectual value? What are we trying to say? Because, a lot of restaurants, like you could probably say, I don't know, maybe half the restaurants in Atlanta serve a burger, but what makes that burger unique to that restaurant? So that's what we apply to every dish. Like what makes this dish a Lazy Betty? What's the, every restaurant has a ravioli. I believe when you came in, you had our ravioli, but what makes ours special, right? And that's one element Aaron is saying. The second one is it's got to be better than the last dish or the dish it's replacing. That just ensures us that we're always moving in the right direction. The third one is also guest feedback. Aaron and I both would eat a cheeseburger with ranch dressing over it.
I would also do that.
Because we're chefs and we like to eat like crap from time to time. But that doesn't mean...
Whoa. There is nothing crappy about a cheeseburger covered in ranch dressing, my friend.
But that being said, like...
Come on.
Ranch
but
is amazing.
that doesn't mean we're gonna put it on our menu, right? So
Right.
guest feedback is very important. Like at one point, we had a lobster on the menu, but I actually personally don't like lobster, but I know a lot of people like it, and our guests had very good feedback to it. So, that's also important to us is guest feedback. And then there's also just making sure things are seasonal if we can. That's probably a little lower on our totem pole, being being how global and how accessible everything is. But that being said, if we can find a local product and it's excellent, we will use that. But if we find the same product and it's coming from Japan and it's better, we will go with the one from Japan.
So we might get scored for that, but local means close. It doesn't necessarily stand for good. So as far as the actual ingredients are concerned, yes. Like if the best ingredient is coming from Washington State and it's not local, I rather rely on starting off with the best. Just take a strawberry. I'm gonna start with the best product I can find, and then work the dish from that, as opposed to finding the closest strawberry.
Got it. These are great. I love the intellectual talk about that, because you do need to think about all of these dishes. And I think I did. So I remember everything was super delicious, but it was also really fun to eat because I was thinking about it. It wasn't just consuming the ranch burger, which would be great, but it doesn't really make me think.
Yeah.
So
I think the interaction with the staff, though, like the way that our staff just not just drops off and describes the food, but how they sort of can check up and just be chill about everything, also adds to that intellectual property.
Yeah.
The intellectual value with the staff interaction in terms of the food is definitely, it intertwines together quite.
It's also funner to sell a dish like that than it is a cheeseburger. Like if your product in itself can inspire your own, your team, whether it's cooks that feel inspired to produce it or servers that are inspired to sell it, it gives them a different level of attachment and commitment to the restaurant, to the product.
Yeah, that's really great. Okay, I look forward to talking more with you, but we're going to have to go through these last questions that I ask everybody at the end. And since there are two of you, if y'all just want to briefly give answers so we can get that, but you can build your picnic basket together. So I'll explain. So first, you're passionate. It's very evident to hear. And it's evident in every bite at Lazy Betty. So really, what is pushing you right now? What is making you hungry?
I'm going to go with the team. I feel an immense amount of responsibility to the people that I work with, to the people that we employ, and also my team at home, my family and my children, to keep on creating, keep on, most importantly, providing a restaurant that people want to come and eat at, so that, we can provide for them. More than the food, it's about just keeping the team inspired and pushing forward in that direction, having a happy work family.
And using food as the medium to do all of that, bring everybody together.
And the drinks.
And the drinks, yes. Yes, which we didn't even get to talk about the celery drink, but...
Absolutely. Yes. Just the whole encompassing. I love food, but as I've become an owner-operator, I've definitely realized how much everything else has its place and is equally important as the food.
Yeah, I think Aaron answered that question great. I think, for me, it's more about, taking care of people in general. Staff's very important, but it's also the guests. I think one takes care of the other. If you can make sure your staff's happy, then your customers and guests will probably be happy. But not necessarily vice versa. So it's, taking care of our peoples, because they'll end up taking care of our guests, which will end up taking care of the business.
Great. All right. So you each have different complementing roles in this business, and some of them overlap. A lot of them overlap too. But what is one aspect of your job at Lazy Betty that meshes like a puzzle piece with a natural aspect of your personality?
I think coming up with dishes. Like where me and Ron mesh the most is when it comes to menu development. Like we have, I don't know if I'm answering that question the right way, but I think that when it comes to like what where our strong suits are at. Like Ron's much better with technology, and I'm much better with nuts and bolts. But when it comes to menu design, like me and Ron get along very well when it comes to cohesively, collaborating on a dish.
What keeps you up at night?
My 11-month-old.
So Aaron has a newborn. I have a 3-year-old, so I was in his shoes 2 years ago. I guess pertaining to the restaurant, I mean, it's been so many different things along this journey. When we first opened, it was, would the market be receptive to our price point and our tasting menu format, which they shown they were. The second one was the big one was the pandemic. Was like, okay, well, can we survive the pandemic? And it looks like we have. So it evolves, but I wouldn't say nothing really keeps me up at night now, because I think we've gone through so much. Opening this restaurant, which is a very niche restaurant in a very historically tough market to open up in, and we've succeeded. And dealing with the pandemic has really, I don't know what else you can throw it our way that we can be like, yeah, it's going to keep us up at late. Barring like a death in the restaurant, like knock on wood, no one dies or nothing.
Yeah, let's not jinx that.
Yeah,
let's
like,
not jinx that.
I in terms of like, I just don't think, I don't know what else you could get thrown our way.
This boat's already been rocked. Not to be cocky or anything like that, but we feel that we are confident with our team. We're confident in our food, and we know that if we keep doing the next right thing, that we'll continue to have a elongated success in this business, in this market.
That's great. All right. I brought it to Atlanta, but we didn't have time to bring it out together. So I have a magic picnic basket. It is only reserved for Southern Fort guests, and it is just some food to bring you life. I can time travel. I can go back and conscript anybody to make anything specifically that you would like to have again. I can source to the level and beyond of what you need me to source, and I can cook a little bit, but really, we're talking fried okra and pound cake, not anything super hard.
Ooh, we get a pound cake?
Yes, you can get a pound cake. Yes,
I want it.
That's happening. So I would love to bring you some of your favorite things. So if you would like to combine a basket together, can you each give me a couple things that would be in that basket?
Are we thinking about it, or are we just firing it off?
Firing it off. I'm asking you a dream meal scenario. Like, what are some of the favorite things that you've ever had, or like,
is this a real kind of basket she's going to give us?
I mean, there's the easy ones like, A5.
Ron's like, please send this.
Yeah. White truffles, J5 Iberico ham. Those are always good stuff to have if I was going to have a picnic basket with no limits. Really good caviar. Ron, you want to jump in?
I mean, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. And, you said you can time travel. And a big part of me is not just what you're eating, but who you're eating with. And that's also one of the bigger lessons I've learned as a restaurant owner. Is food's important, but it's also who you're dining with. Mm-hmm. And for me, I would love for you to dial back your time machine a couple years. And so I could eat with my mother and eat something that she prepared. Because, my mother passed away about 4 months after we opened. And the name is named after my mother, right? So that's kind of what I would like. You could put anything you want, and if I could have one last meal with my mother and let her see like what her legacy, how it stands out in the Atlanta food scene, and what she inspired Aaron and I to do, and how much of an impact she's made. That's kind of what I would like.
Well, I can't compete with that.
That's okay. Caviar and Iberico ham is quite legit in there too.
Fair.
But I mean, if it's food only, I would say I had a tremendous meal cooked for me by my very good friend who I was on the final table with in Japan. I went there with my wife, and it was the best meal of my life. It was not only was the quality of ingredients extraordinary, it's the thought that he put behind each meal. He made like an 18-course tasting omakase meal or kaiseki meal for my wife and I, but he catered the each recipe and each course to me and my wife, because he knows what we like, and it was amazing.
I wouldn't mind getting cooked for by, if I could go back in time, like if I had the ability to get like a one-on-one with Robichon and have him cooking in his prime and eat that, that would be pretty dope. Now that I'm thinking about that time machine.
The time machine's always the kicker.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have all those exquisite products to go with it. So yeah, I think I would definitely want a meal by him.
That sounds great. Well, if people want to learn more about Lazy Betty in Atlanta, Georgia, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. On that note, we will have images so you can see the faces behind both of these chef voices. If you like what you hear, Ron got to run around and eat at restaurants for his job, and I do too. And I love this job. It is fascinating to eat and then to talk to the people behind the food. So the easiest way to know exactly where to eat in any city that you're visiting in the South is to subscribe to the Southern Fork, because that way the podcast just lands in your podcast app every week without you having to remember it. So thank you so much for dealing with the most annoying remote app we've ever done. But I can't wait to eat your food again, for real.
We can't wait to have you.
Yeah, you were a lot of fun and a pleasure to cook for. I look forward to telling some jokes and talking more shit.
We'll probably use the same jokes too, and because we got which ones we used on you already.
That's right. And I'll sit at the chef's counter next time. No, I can't get any closer. Okay.
All right, you better be ready to bring it then.
All right. Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I know a lot of you might not be so into tasting menus as I am, and you might just kind of chalk that up to me being a food writer, but I'm going to tell you specifically why I, Stephanie, not necessarily Stephanie the food writer, enjoys tasting menus. 1, I like them because I love not having to make any decisions over dinner. We live in a world of millions of micro decisions on a weekly basis. Once I've decided what time the reservation is, what I'm going to wear, and if I'm going to go for the pairing options, the beverage pairing options that most tasting menus provide, I am done with decisions for that portion of the evening. And I can just sit back and relax in a fine dining restaurant in much of the way I would do if I was over at your house for dinner. Because I'm not going to tell you what course I should like next and I would like to sub out the tater tots for the onion rings. It's whatever you're cooking. And I really enjoy not having to make those decisions. Secondly, I enjoy trying new combinations of flavors that I did not expect. I have an open palate, so I'm not really worried about, not being able to handle tasting something, but I didn't always have that. I had to develop that, and one way I did that is by trusting the palates of chefs more than my own palate and experimenting. And it's also about texture and presentation and color. And I love visual art, so it's also very visual. And then third, that kind of goes hand in hand with this. I love learning. And to me, a tasting menu is experiential learning. I learn through my eyes and then I learn when I experience the food and the service and the way the beverage pairings go together. So anyway, it's just entertainment for me beyond just sustenance. So anyway, have a great week. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?